Hi everyone, I'm Rincey and this is Rincey Reads. Today I'm going to be doing my October wrap-up and I'm going to jump right in because I got a lot. So first up, I did a booktuber shout-out at the beginning of the month. If you didn't see that video, please check it out because there are a lot of really great booktubers that I highlight. Also, I mentioned this in that video, but I always have a link in the description to a booktuber shout-out playlist. So anyone who I've ever shouted out and still has a channel is listed in that playlist. Then I did my quarter 3 check-in where I basically just go over my goals and look at my stats for my reading for the year so far. A lot of you guys were asking in the comment section like how I make the charts and like how I track my reading and things like that. I just use like a regular old spreadsheet and then, you know, use the information from that to make the charts and things like that. If you check out that video and look in the comment section, I've replied to a couple people linking to a Book Riot article, and I basically use a very similar spreadsheet style as that Book Riot article, so you can definitely check that out and adjust the spreadsheet to what you want to track specifically. I also did a Friday read / Dewey 24-hour readathon TBR video, and I never did a Dewey wrap-up. So if you were wondering what I read during the 24-hour readathon and you weren't following me on Twitter, I basically just finished off reading Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel, and then I didn't read anything else that I mentioned in that video, and I basically just read Saga Volumes 1 and 2. And if you want to know what I thought of Saga Volumes 1 and 2, you can check out my comics roundup that I did that next week. Segues, man. But yeah, that comics roundup just talks about the comics and graphic novels that I read in September and October, so check that out if you're interested in comics. And then I did 3 book reviews over the course of the month. I did a review on I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou, and then I did a review on Bad Feminist by Roxane Gay, and then the final one I did was on Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. I thoroughly enjoyed all of those books, so definitely check out those reviews if you're interested in any of them. I highly recommend all of them to all people in the world, so if you just want a basic synopsis, there you go, or a basic idea, I recommend them. Read them. If they sound interesting to you, then I recommend reading them. And now in terms of books that I read this month, I read a lot more than those 3 books this month, so just really quickly, I read Nightmares by Jason Segel and Kristen Miller. This is a middle grade novel, and yes, Jason Segel is that Jason Segel from How I Met Your Mother and Freaks and Geeks and Forgetting Sarah Marshall and the Muppet movie. He was in Chicago promoting this book, so I decided to go see him, and you know, I got the book personalized and autographed and all that stuff, so that was really fun. It was really cool seeing him live because he is very funny, very entertaining, but also is really insightful and has a lot of really great thoughts about writing and just being a creative person and pursuing things that aren't very like typical or standard, like pursuing things that are more artistic and stuff like that. So it was really great to see that and just hear those words of wisdom. In terms of the story itself, the story follows this young boy named Jake who basically has difficulties falling asleep because every time he falls asleep he has these really bad nightmares, hence the name. And it turns out that the nightmares that he's actually transporting to another world where a lot of bad things are happening. I like this book, but I wasn't super crazy about this book. I feel like this is a book that you like better when you actually are in middle grade. If you are someone who enjoys middle grade novels a lot, you'll probably like this book, or if you know someone who is in that age range, they probably would like this book a lot. I found it to be just like kind of predictable, and I could see the twists coming, and they twisted exactly how I guessed they would. So in that sense, it wasn't like super enjoyable for me, but I feel like that's also just having the viewpoint of an adult and reading a lot of books, so I kind of know what to expect. So this book just feels like very standard, and it's also the first book in a trilogy, but this book also stands alone very well. So it's not like it ends on a cliffhanger, but there is enough setup that you could see that they're going to have more books in the future, and Jason Segel said himself that this is going to be a trilogy. So you could definitely read this alone without needing the other 2 books at all, which is something that I really appreciate. It's not like a cliffhanger ending or anything like that. And then I read The Suspicions of Mr. Witcher, A Shocking Murder and the Undoing of a Great Victorian Detective by Kate Summerscale. Summerscale? Yes, Summerscale. This book is a nonfiction book that follows basically like the first detective that solved like a major murder mystery in England. The detective in this book is supposedly the inspiration behind a lot of great fictional literary detectives like Sherlock Holmes and things like that. This book was kind of disappointing because the story really isn't about the detective himself, even though that's the way they set it up. It's kind of just about this time period and police work in this time period. So I feel like if you are interested in England in the 1800s, this will have a lot of information. It felt like there was a lot of just extra stuff that was put in here, like Kate Summerscale basically just did as much research as she possibly could, and everything that she found out she put into this book, and I feel like there's a good like 100 pages that could have been cut out because it wasn't really relevant to the mystery or the detective. I feel like the detective is almost like a minor character in this book because he's talked about, but he's also just talked about in relation to other characters, and yeah, it was kind of disappointing. And then I read I Hunt Killers by Barry Liga, not quite sure how to say that. I checked this out from the library, and this is basically a young adult novel where you are following a boy who is the son of a serial killer, and it turns out that there is another murder that happens in their town, and it's very similar to the way that his father killed people, but his father's in jail, so they're trying to figure out who's doing this, who's the copycat, but the boy is also just trying to redeem himself and prove that he isn't like his father. This is a book that I didn't realize was the first in a series, and this is one that ends on a cliffhanger, so you need to keep reading the books to figure out what's going to happen. And I didn't like this book enough to want to keep reading. Like, it was entertaining in and of itself, but I felt like parts of it really dragged, and then the ending happens and then everything happens so quickly, and then you're left with this cliffhanger and you have to read the next book to figure out what's going to happen. It's not bad, but it's one of those books where I wish it was just a standalone book. But it did sort of like scratch that itch of reading about serial killers and murderers that I like to always scratch in the month of October, so I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I liked it. I'm not like super anxious to recommend it to other people because it is the first in a series, and personally I'm someone who's not really into committing to a series right now, so take with that what you will. And then I read Broken Monsters by Lauren Bukes. This story takes place in Detroit, and it basically follows this detective named Gabrielle who finds a body, but it's like horribly mutated so that it's the top half of a young boy, maybe like 12 years old, and then the bottom half is cut off, but he's fused together to the bottom half of a deer. So it's like this really twisted, weird murder. And then there's a bunch of other characters that are in play that you sort of can tell have some sort of knowledge into the murder, but you're not completely sure how all of the threads come together. This was an interesting book, and I wanted to review it because I wanted to talk about it, but at the same time I'm not completely sure how to talk about it. I read this like over the course of like 2 months because I started this in September, and I kept putting it down, and every time I would put it down I didn't have a very strong desire to pick it up. But then when I was reading it, I was super into it because this book is just so weird and twisted, and I don't necessarily feel like, I mean, it is a thriller, but it's not, because it doesn't have that like high-paced or fast-paced intensity to it. Like, it's a slow burn thriller, so know that going into it. Also, it's just like slightly weird. There is a slightly supernatural element to it, and I won't say more than that because I feel like it might spoil things, but there's just like weird things that happen. Also, you find out pretty early on like which character did it, so it's not so much of a whodunit mystery, it's more of a what's going to happen in the end mystery, like will this guy get caught or not, or will this person just end up murdering more people, things like that. So I don't know how to like talk about this book because I've seen a lot of people compare this book to being sort of like True Detective, and I haven't watched True Detective, but the sort of aura that True Detective has I feel like is very similar to this book. So if you like True Detective, then maybe you'll like this book. I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars because again, I liked it and I found it very interesting, and it's not like anything else I've ever read before, which I definitely give credit to it, but at the same time I found it just sort of like watching a candle burn something, where it's like exciting at parts, but then it sort of gets boring and then you just ends, and I don't know. I wasn't super crazy about this book, but then again, a lot of people at Book Riot absolutely loved this book and loved how weird and twisted and crazy it was, and it like gave them nightmares. So I don't know, it didn't really have a very strong effect on me. And then I read Horns by Joe Hill. I got this from the library, and this was a really interesting book. This book was so bonkers. It's so weird and so crazy and so twisted and so disturbing, but it's also really well written, and Joe Hill has a really good handle on how to sort of take what you know or your preconceived notions about the world and just literature and horror novels and sort of twisting it and turning it so it's not exactly what you think it's going to be, which I definitely appreciated. There is a problem with pacing with this book. The first half is like super engaging and you're like go go go, and then the book is split into I believe 4 or 5 parts, I don't remember exactly, but then when it gets to towards the end, one of the parts I was not into whatsoever. I just started skimming pages because I was not interested in what was happening. It felt like slightly irrelevant information. It was background info, so you understood that character a lot better, but at the same time I also didn't care at all, so I didn't really want to read it. And then by the time I got to the last section, I just wanted it to be over so I could know how it was going to resolve, and so I was just like flipping through it real quick to finish it. But I also found the ending to be slightly like anticlimactic. I don't know. So I ended up giving it a 3 out of 5 stars again because I liked it at the beginning and I was so into it, but then by the time I got to the end I was like over it because it just felt like it was taking too long. Like I feel like this is a book that should have been edited down significantly and then it would have been a much stronger novel. And then I read Me Before You by Jojo Moyes. This is a book that a lot of people really love and I understand why, but I didn't necessarily love it. This book follows a girl named Louisa who is just like your basic ordinary girl. She never went to college and she's sort of just working a job at a cafe, but then one day the cafe is closing so she has to find a new job and she ends up working as like a caretaker for this guy named Will who is in a wheelchair, and she's not like a nurse, but she's basically just there to watch over him because he is very paralyzed and like can't fully function with his hands and things like that. So she's just there to like keep him company and do basic things like help him eat and like turn on the TV and stuff like that. Will is like this super broody, super depressed guy, obviously because of the condition that he's in, and so Louisa is there to sort of just like raise his spirits and like help him see how fulfilling his life can be despite the fact that he's in a wheelchair. This book, I read it in like a day because it's a super fast read and it's very engaging. Like I definitely wanted to know what was going to happen to these characters, but at the same time I also found it to be really predictable and very just standard. This book reminds me a lot of like Jodi Picoult in the sense that it raises a lot of emotions when you're reading it because it brings up a lot of deep topics, but at the same time I just found it to be very obvious and also just falls into the stereotypes of a romantic comedy sort of. Like I could totally see this being made into a movie. It definitely like pulls on your heartstrings because again of the topics that it talks about in this book. When I finished the book I was just like, oh, alright, that was it. Like I didn't find the conclusion very satisfying, although I was able to read it in a day, so I was engaged with the story, but I wasn't like in love with it. So I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars because I liked it a lot. And I don't know if my expectations were just too high because everyone seems to love this book, but I thought it was alright. I don't regret reading it obviously, and I liked it, but I wasn't like super in love with it and I totally guessed what was going to happen in the end. And then the final book that I read this month was Yes Please by Amy Poehler. I got this from the library, which was super exciting because finding a new release like Amy Poehler's memoir at the library on the day it's released is like a miracle. But I read it in like 2 days and I loved it a lot. I will be doing a full review of that and that is coming this Thursday, so you guys can look forward to that. But if you are a fan of Amy Poehler or like those sort of like celebrity memoirs, I definitely recommend it. It's very different without being too different from the standard celebrity memoir. I felt like it left me feeling very inspired and just like full of wanting to love things in the world, so I like that. But again, I'll be doing a full review on that this Thursday. So yeah, that is my October. That was a lot of books I had to talk about. I read a lot this month. I wasn't planning on it, but things just kept coming in and I was just like speeding through them, so I'm very proud of myself for that. As usual, in case you guys don't know, there are links down below to all of the books I've talked about, all of the videos I've talked about, and also my social media links are down there, so if you want to like follow me on Goodreads so you can see on a day-to-day basis what I'm reading, you can always do that as well. Also feel free to let me know how your October went and maybe let me know what your favorite book or least favorite book of the month was. I'd love to hear about those things as well. So yeah, that's all I have for now and thanks for watching.